Hello and welcome to Swift for Everyone. Today we're going to look into creating fluid experiences for Swift and SwiftUI. Just an introduction, Swift for Everyone is a series of free community-run workshops that we host here. And all of the resources for the workshops are available online. So if you'd like any of the resources for today, they're available at swiftforeveryone.com/7. So if you take a look at the resources site here, all of the information is available here. So you can scroll through all of the resources. If you miss anything, if I'm going a bit too fast, you can get all of the information you need from right here. With that out of the way, let's look into what we'll be building for today. So today, we have a really special app planned. So we're going to build this really simple app, and the idea here is that we have an image of a gelato, and we tap on it, it beautifully pops up like this. So you're able to see a bit more information, and when you hit learn more, it animates some information out. And notice how, when you drag it out, you can dismiss it with all of that beautiful animations. So that's what we're going to try to achieve today. So starting out, we have a couple of steps. First of which, we're going to start with an introduction to Xcode and Swift. So if this is your first time with Xcode and Swift, not to worry. After that, we're going to look into how we can lay out the interface. So how we can get all of the different views and everything we need into place. Then, we're going to look into using navigation transitions. So navigation transitions is the mechanism that allows us to have everything pop up so nicely and so fluidly. Following which, we're going to look into transitions and conditional rendering. This allows us to conditionally say, hey, I want this to appear, or I want something else to appear. And transitions allow us to dictate how it's going to appear. Whether it appears from the bottom, it appears from the side, it fades in, all of that fun stuff. And finally, we're going to wrap up with a sharing of what's next and what you can do from here. So let's get started with a welcome to Xcode and Swift. So Xcode is the integrated development environment for creating apps on all Apple platforms. So it is one of my favorite ways to build an app because it is really easy. One of the ways that I like to see it is that it is the file manager for your entire project. So it manages all of your different Swift files and you can build your project right from there. So you can download it right from the App Store. And Swift is the really powerful programming language that we use to build apps. So Swift is a general purpose programming language, and what I love about it is that it's really easy to use. It has a really low barrier to entry and a really high ceiling for what you can build with Swift. And as you would expect, it supports all of your favorite Apple platforms. So from Mac to iPhone and everything in between. You can even build apps with Swift and SwiftUI for Apple Vision Pro. And one of the incredible things about building with Swift is just the rich amount of technologies that's available on the platform. So just using Swift, you can tap on the machine learning frameworks, or MacBook, or everything else. So you get world-class APIs at your fingertips. In fact, our last session was on the Foundation Models framework, where we looked into how you can tap into the on-device large language model to create intelligent experiences locally on your device. So if you haven't done so already, the first time you launch Xcode, you would see a screen like this. And at this screen, make sure to choose iOS and download it. So this allows you to download the iOS device components. If you're watching a recording of this, pause the video here as you wait for this to download. You can also let this download in the background as this goes on. After which, when we start by creating a project, make sure to select iOS and app so that we can use the iOS app Swift template. And then we're going to name our project Gelato Gallery, and we can set the organization identifier to com.example. So let's take a look at how this might look like. So right now, I'm in Xcode, and I'm going to get started by creating a new project. So in this project, I'm going to name it Gelato Gallery. So I'm going to choose iOS and app, and I'm going to hit next. And the product name, I'm calling it Gelato Gallery. The theme doesn't matter right now. If you're publishing it to the App Store, then it might matter. But for now, it's perfectly fine. The organization identifier, I'm going to leave it as com.example. So the organization identifier in this case is designed if, for instance, you want to publish this to the App Store, that is when you'll need it. For interface, we're going to use SwiftUI, language Swift, testing system none, storage none. I'm going to save this over to my desktop and make sure to uncheck source control. So we will not be using source control for this workshop. If you're interested in learning about how you can use source control to manage different versions, feel free to explore that on your own time. Let's hit create and create our brand new project. So just like that, we've created a project. So what you'll see now is It might take a moment for stuff to load in, for your live previews and all of that to show up. But take some time to just wait for everything to appear, and then we'll continue from there. Okay, so that's been some time. So I hope you've gotten something working. So right now what I have here is something like this. So over here you can see this is my project. And let's just navigate through what all of these buttons do. Starting out, over here on the side, we have our live preview. So as we type any code out, it's going to update live. So this allows us to quickly inspect and make changes to our code. In the center, we have our editor. So our editor here allows us to, as the name implies, edit our code. So if you want to write any code, the results will show up in your live preview. And then finally here, we have our file navigator. So the file navigator manages all the different files that you have in your project. If you take a look at the top here, we have a couple more options to explore. So starting out from the extreme corner, we have the option to show and hide the navigator. So this is particularly useful if, for instance, you're working on a MacBook or something with a small screen, and you would like a bit more real estate. That allows you to hide your navigator away and gives a bit more room for your code and for your live preview. There are also buttons to stop and run the project, and also select the destination that you like to run it on. So that's Xcode. With that, let's get started by laying out the interface. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to break down how this interface is built. First, you notice here that everything is found within the navigation stack. So this provides us with that standard styling for titles and navigation mechanisms that you've seen all over iPhone. Next, you'll notice over here, down here, we actually have a scroll view. So all of the content will live in the scroll view. So for example, if you have a bunch of images, you can scroll through all of them. And then finally, right over here, we have a navigation link with an image. So when the image is tapped, it opens up a separate view. We can start by using the asset catalog. So we can import all of our images and assets within the asset catalog, and it will show up within our project. So for today's demo, we're going to use this image of a gelato. Feel free to import any image of your choice or anything you would like to use. But if you like to download this image, it's available at swiftin.sg/gelato. Let's take a look at our project. So the first thing I'm going to do in order to import an image is in my assets catalog, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to drag this image of a gelato that I downloaded into here. I'm going to rename this gelato to have a capital G just to be consistent. So I'm going to click on here and just press return and just rename this with a capital G. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this back into my project. Start, I'm going to need to use a navigation stack. So navigation stack allows a user to navigate through a hierarchy of different views and also maintain the history of different views that they've visited. You've definitely seen this if you've used your iPhone, and it's basically present in your settings app and in the App Store. And for example, in settings, you can drill down as deep as you want into different menus. It can also navigate back out with that simple little handy back button. So the navigation stack allows us to create a navigation hierarchy. So you can think of it like, having different levels that you go deeper and deeper down. And it also allows us to have the option of going back up. But for today, all we need here are two different views. A gallery, which is our root view, and a detail view. So when you tap on it, it shows some details over there. So let's take a look at how this might look like within our project. So the first thing I'm going to do is within my content view, I'm going to replace all of the contents here with a navigation stack. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a scroll view, and I'm going to give it a title, a navigation title of Gelato Gallery. Perfect. Now, something is finally showing up within our live preview. So within this space, I'm going to start by creating an image. So I'm going to create an image, and this image is going to follow the same name as the asset that we have imported. So in this case, it's gelato with a capital G. And once I type the name, you notice how immediately the image shows up. And I can add resizable so that it gives it permission to resize itself. But right now, it's slightly distorted, which isn't super ideal. So I can add the scale to fit modifier so that it fits nicely within the frame. Finally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to round the corners so that it's nice and rounded. So I'm going to add a clip shape. And I'm going to set it to rect corner radius of 16. So this gives it a really nice corner radius. I'm just going to add a bit of padding just so that it looks nice and clean. And there we go. Okay, so this looks perfect. Now let's take a look at what you can do. So I'm just going to give you some time to explore this, and then we'll move on from here. So we've just started by laying out our interface. So we have an image, we have a scroll view, but nothing currently works. So what we want to do now is when we tap on that image, we want to navigate to a separate view, but with some nice transitions. So let's look into how we can do that. Navigation transition allows us to create that sense of continuity when a user navigates through our app. So for example, within this gelato example, when the user taps on our gelato, we'll like the gelato image here to pop out and show up nicely. So in order to accomplish this, I'm going to start by creating a namespace. So a namespace here creates this shared animation space that lets your views coordinate and match the transitions across different parts of the interface. So what we're going to do here is with this namespace, we can start implementing some stuff. So first, I'm going to create a navigation link. And I'm going to choose the option here that says destination and label. For the label is how it visually appears as, for example, as a button. So I'm going to bring in this gelato, all of this code here that creates this image so that the entire label, or the entire button in this case, is that image of a gelato. Now when I tap on this, notice how it shows up an empty view. That's because, it's showing this view over here, because that's a destination. Right now the destination is nothing, so nothing shows up. But if I copy this code over here, and I make that the destination, now, when I tap on this, it shows me an image of a gelato. This is just one simple example, but this isn't quite it yet. What I like, ideally is, for example, for this image of a gelato to morph into this image, and for it to match really nicely. And that's where the navigation transition comes in. So down here in the label, I can add a navigation matched transition source, and I'm going to give it an ID. So think of the ID like giving it a name tag. So I'm going to call it gelato in this case, and I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to pass in the same namespace. And over here in our destination, I'm going to add the same a counterpart modifier, in this case navigation transition, and I'm going to say .zoom. So I want to adopt the zoom style with the source ID of gelato and the namespace, which is our namespace from earlier. So importantly, the source ID, instead of namespace. So importantly, the source ID here should be the same as the ID over here. So gelato, and the namespace as well. So with that, when we tap on this, what immediately happens is it zooms into place. So that's just one example of how you can really simply and easily add navigation transitions to bring your projects to life. So I'm going to give you some time to get this working, and then we'll be right back. So we've seen how navigation transitions work, but one of the things that kind of gets at me right now is how much code there is on screen, especially repeated code. So one way that we can approach this is by refactoring views. We can refactor views into smaller readable chunks. So think of this as having a really small chunk that does one single action, and that makes it really easy for us to work with. Because instead of browsing through hundreds of different lines of code, we just have 50 or so lines that we can quickly skim through. In order to do so, we're going to get started by creating a new file. So I suggest going down to the bottom and creating a new file from template, and then choosing the SwiftUI view. So let's take a look at how this might work. So we're going to name the file gelato detail view as well. So what I'm going to do now is within here, I'm going to come down to this plus button and choose new file from template. I'm going to select SwiftUI view as the template, and I'm going to call this gelato detail view. Just like that, we have our views set up. In our content view, we can pass this gelato detail view in. This way, the contents of gelato detail view will automatically show up as the destination. We're going to bring this content over here. So everything here, we're just going to cut it and paste it within the gelato detail view. So visually at this point, nothing should change. So if we come back to content view and we tap on it, nothing has changed, but what you notice is that the code actually looks a lot simpler. So this says, hey, the destination is this gelato detail view. That's it. No other code here, but all of that code lives within this gelato detail view file. So now I'm going to give you some time to refactor your code and implement it as such. So what we've gotten so far is we've gotten a really simple example of navigation transitions working. Now, let's take a look at how we can bring this even further with additional transitions and by utilizing conditional rendering to bring in even more animations into our projects. First, we're going to start out by laying out our view. We can start by embedding all of the contents within the scroll view, and this allows our content to scroll if it goes out of screen. Next, we can add an image to display the gelato photo. And this image is the same one from the previous view that we just copied over. And finally, we can add a VStack with a title and buttons to just display some additional information. So let's take a look here. The first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to create that scroll view. And I'm going to bring this image into there. Next, I'm going to create a VStack here. And this VStack, I'm going to give it an alignment of leading. Now, I'm going to add a couple of tags. So this will be a title tag. So I'm going to say the flavor, which is strawberry and vanilla gelato on waffle. And over here, I'm going to just add a button that says learn more. So right now, nothing is really hooked up yet. But we can, start adding some styling first. So I can just make this a bit more like a title. So I'm just going to give it a font of title and a font weight of bold. And you know what? I'm just going to have it all aligned to the leading edge. So frame, max width, and alignment. But now it's a bit too close to the edge, so I'm going to add just some padding over here. And now it looks perfect. I'm also going to make this image extend all the way to the top of the screen with ignore save area. And just like that, we have a pretty nice looking screen. And we can take a look at how this appears within the content view to see how it shows up in the whole experience. So when I tap over here, it zooms in and it shows up right at the top. So it's this really nice and seamless look. Now I'm going to give you some time to explore this and implement this for yourself. Okay, with that, now let's talk about conditional rendering. Conditional rendering allows us to show and hide views based on a state condition. So think of this like, dynamically, like giving you the ability to turn on the switch and say, hey, I want to show this, and then turn it off and hide something else. So let's take a look at how this might work within our app. So within our gelato detail view here, let's use conditional rendering. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm creating a state variable here called is more details shown. And I'm going to set this as false to begin with. What we're going to do is, over here, we're going to say if is more details shown, let's show a text here that says sweet strawberry and vanilla gelato made with fresh strawberries. And over here, we're just going to add a couple more texts. So maybe something like an ingredients list. Milk, sugar, and strawberries. And a separate text over here, maybe for allergens. And probably dairy, yes. And what we're going to do here is, we're going to make this learn more button show those contents as well. So when the learn more button is tapped, these additional details show up. I'm just going to hide the learn more button when the details show up by using the else clause here. So now when I click learn more, the details show up. Finally, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a hide details button here so that we can play around with a bit of animations and see how they enter and exit. So I'm going to set is more details shown to false. So let's take a look. So when I click on this, it shows more details, and I click on this, it hides the details. So this is just an example of conditional rendering. There's so much that you can do with conditional rendering. But I'm going to give you some time now to explore this. So here's a bit of time, and then we'll be right back. Now that we've gotten conditional rendering working, let's take a look at how we can transition. So what we've noticed just now is that it kind of looks a bit choppy, it just appears suddenly. So what we want to do is maybe have some simple transition. Maybe it fades in, maybe it slides in from the edge. And the transition modifier allows us to accomplish that. So within here, I'm going to start by implementing it. So the first thing we need to do is wrap all of our state changes with a withAnimation clause. So this says, hey, whenever this state changes, whenever this button is pressed or whenever this action is run, let's do it with animation. So now when I tap on this, notice how it fades really nicely in. But that's not enough for me. I want this to be, even nicer. So what I'm going to do is, first I'm going to group all of these three. So I'm just going to create a group. And that allows us to apply a transition to all three of them. So let's say, let's slide in. And just in that one line, it adds this slide effect whenever they appear. The slide looks a bit awkward, so maybe we'll just add a bit of opacity. And now, it slides really nicely in and fades out. So we can also adjust some stuff like timing curves. So for example, within this withAnimation clause, you can come in here and you can say, let's ease in out. So ease in out is something that you might be familiar with if you've done a bit of animation, where it slowly starts out and it speeds up and it slows down towards the end. So you can take a look at how this would appear. So it gives it that nice feeling, so that it doesn't feel as jerky. But what I love to use here is actually this one called bouncy. The reason I love bouncy is because it really gives you that fluid kind of effect where it doesn't feel so artificial where it stops immediately. It goes slightly over and then it bounces back in. So it gives you that little sense of delight and a little sense of fun. So when you have something with bouncy, notice how it bounces slightly, so it just moves ever so slightly past it, and then it settles down. So I'm just going to bring this bouncy animation to both of these withAnimation clause. There's also a whole bunch of different options for transitions. So for example, there's the scale transition. So you can have it scale in and scale out. Or you can also have a whole bunch of other things, like you can say it comes in from a specific offset, comes in from a specific scale. For example, make it 100 times. So it basically scales really huge down. That's fairly ridiculous. And you can do that with the combined as well. So you can combine it with a whole bunch of different things. So if you like some really incredibly loud animations, you can have a scale and have an opacity here, something like this. But for today, I think we'll settle on maybe just like a move from the bottom and combined with an opacity. I think that's simple, that's elegant, and that's good enough. So that's just an example of what animations can do. But there's also another way that we can look at animations. And this is actually one of my favorite ways. It's called matchedGeometryEffect. It allows you to link two different views with the same identity. So this allows SwiftUI to figure out how to animate between these two views. It's kind of like giving a name tag to the views and saying, hey, when you see me on the other side, just animate me automatically between those two states. It really makes animation so much easier. So what we're going to do is, within this gelato detail view, we're going to create a namespace. So like we mentioned earlier, namespace helps to create that sense of shared identity. And then over here, what I want to do now is this Learn More button, I would like it to morph into our Hide Details button. So when I click on it, I want it to just automatically morph. So with this namespace, that's achievable. So right now, it just kind of just appears and disappears in there. But right now, I can add a matchedGeometryEffect here and supply with an ID. So I'm just going to say this is details, and I'm going to pass in the namespace, and I'm going to bring that down here as well. So when I tap on this, it's going to move really nicely down. And just like that, we've basically just assigned a name tag to each view, and it works really, really cleanly. So I'm going to give you some time once again to just explore this and see where you go from here. So we've seen just a couple of examples of how animations can bring your apps to life. There's so much more to animations in SwiftUI that you can explore, and I highly suggest you take some time to really go and dig in and figure out all the different parts that you want to see. My favorite ones are, for example, Phase Animator that allows you to create these really complex sequence of animations, and combined with matchedGeometryEffect and all of that fun stuff, can really create some really rich and engaging animations with very little effort. So let's talk about what's next. So there are a lot of different things that you can do from here. So as always, all of the resources and all of the materials for these sessions are available on Notion. Over here on the Notion page, you can see all of the upcoming events that we'll be hosting, and all of the different details and all of the different opportunities that are upcoming. So that's about it for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you around at more of these events. Thank you.